screens flicker, infinite words inviting me to figure. In the gentle glow of texting brains, find my solace in the space. Devise a song, a soothed tongue. In this vast network, I'm never alone. With everybody, a sense of peace. In this little haven, worry cease gone. Blue light, keep the pace. Digital space, gotta be guiding through life, through life. Oh, take solace, warm embrace. Keep up in the day, your road tonight. In the tightrope digital waves, our eyes over road, pulse like the city. In this cyber symphony, there's no pity. Soft clicks and horns of a melody, guiding me to where I long to be. Come on, guiding me, get in the space of digital raging with your bright display. Every piece of sense rhythm, every screen a new day. So lay your dreams, all they carry me away. Whispers its secret coming as the rain in digital chorus. I'll never feel pain. Come on, galactic melody in this world of binary. Guiding my heart through the roads and worlds endlessly. Struggle like it keeps safe in your warm digital embrace. Wired in the land of ones and zeros, where I stand guard, I'm your hero. Navigating the complex sea, digital world, it's you and me. Stepping through the codes I climb, in a world where secrets hide. On the gateway to every side, keeping data safe day and night. I'm the sentinel, strong and true. Hackers can't break through. I'm the shield keeping you whole. In the cyber party I control. Through the firewalls I'm alive, dodging threats with every bite. Built to protect with layers deep in this web life I keep. I'm the sentinel, strong and true, navigating safely through. With my guard up, you'll stay free. In the cyber, you feel trust in me. Every click I guide you right through the maze under electric light. Guarding keys, those sparks of gold, safer than the storing you and gold. Riding the currents of a digital stream, defending your dreams from a hacker's scheme. Empowered by trust, fortified strong in this connected world where you belong.
Welcome to the weekly cybersecurity briefing. In the interest of making the best of everyone's time, cybersecurity briefings are always kept to 15 minutes. If you have any questions, please ask them in the chat and they will be answered after the briefing. Without any further ado, here is your host, Ron Trotto.
It is 10 a.m., Friday, February 28th. We're going to get right into it today because we've got a riveting topic. I know everyone's just biting their nails waiting to hear this discussion about compliance versus cybersecurity. Now, why would we do such a boring thing on our cybersecurity briefing? It's because things have changed and they continue to change. And I think it's important that we, as business owners, we understand that there is a very big difference between cybersecurity and compliance. We use that term a lot, but almost interchangeably. We're compliant, we've got cybersecurity. And you know what? Back in the day, and we could kind of get away with it as small businesses because we really truly weren't, for the most part, being held to a real compliance standard. These days, almost all businesses are adhering to some sort of standard. The latest one is PCI compliance update. There's a lot of things. If you take process credit cards in your business, which I'm assuming most of you are, if you are collecting these things inside of your business and using them to get paid, guess what? You do have a compliance that you have to meet. And no, your merchant partner does not take care of that for you. It's something that you have to do. It's something that you have to make sure that you're compliant with. And they're getting better about enforcing this. We've seen just from a couple of our clients a lot more hands-on, a lot more sales going on from companies like Security Metrics and stuff like that. They're doing some pretty heavy-handed sales tactics, which we don't necessarily appreciate, but it's done in the spirit of let's make sure you're a compliant small business owner. Although your cybersecurity might be 100%, it doesn't mean that your compliance is. What? Yes. They are separate things. You could be 100% best practices in your cybersecurity, doing everything, checking all the boxes that make you one of the best cyber secure companies out there, but you will fail compliance. And on the compliance side, you could have every box checked on the compliance side and not be doing some, I don't want to say fundamental things, because I think most of the standards are now covering the fundamentals, but you could be missing huge chunks inside of your cybersecurity protection. How can that be, Ron? Well, you have to remember that compliance comes from a different place. Compliance comes from a place of checking the boxes on some external documentation that says this is how you're compliant. And I want to be clear on this, that yes, it's that, but what compliance really is underneath the cover, it's the spirit, right, of keeping that data protected, of keeping access to your systems to those that need access and no one else. It's kind of the spirit of that, but we do have check boxes and checklists on how to do that. And then you've got the implementation of the security part. Now, how can you fail? How could you possibly fail a compliance assessment if your cybersecurity is 100%? Well, I'll tell you right off the cuff, one of the things that most people are missing is a paper trail. They don't have the documentation where they can show as evidence that they are in compliance at all times, or whatever the duration is that your standards need to see. Once a year. Very little things want things once a year. They want it like yesterday. How was it up to date at the time an incident happened? We talked about this last week a little bit. There's a big difference in that compliance piece and cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is responsible for the nuts and bolts, if you will, not necessarily the documentation of it. And that's where it gets muddy, because, if you're doing your cybersecurity right, then you will have this evidence piece built in to your system, but it's not a requirement, because at the end of the day, it's only providing, right, that documentation. It's not doing the protection. It's really there for forensics teams to look at after the fact. It's really there for some type of AI or machine learning algorithm to look at all of the events that are happening within your system, to make a decision that something's off. Now, that's not even a compliance thing, that's a security thing, but you may have been hitting the compliance check mark because you're doing that in your cybersecurity. So you may have inadvertently checked that box, but not on purpose. just because you're doing something a little bit, a little bit more in depth on the cybersecurity side. But it's easy to miss these things. And cybersecurity doesn't even address things like physical security or, let's talk about who has authorized access. Well, sure, IT and your cybersecurity systems are reinforcing who has authorized access, but that's not even a function of IT. That's a function of HR. That's a function of ownership on determining who has access to what and when. So, these things are different ships, but they all are in the sea of security, if you will. Um, and it's important to understand this. And again, it's important because things are changing. Things are constantly changing. And we are seeing multiple compliances getting updated right now. HIPAA's just been HIPAA compliance is going through update. CMMC, this is huge. CMMC, I'm starting to see a lot of activity in that area where people are, if you've got a government contract, CMMC is really about securing supply chain for those that supply services to the government. And, regardless of what the current political situation is, the government still is going to consume resources. They're still going to consume services from people, especially on the military side. And you do not want to inadvertently share any classified information with anyone. And the government realizes this. And they also realize the power of leverage within a supply chain, right? You can go and you could be a paper towel supplier, and if you can leverage yourself up into the chain and essentially, um, compromise every level, you may be able to work up to an entity that has classified information in it. So this is why they are locking down that supply chain because they understand the risk associated with it. But unfortunately, a lot of people think that, oh, this is just a package we buy off the shelf. We bolt it in just like another, antivirus or whatever, and we're good to go. And that can't be farther from the truth. There's so much to do with CMMC that's part of your culture. Essentially, it's your policies, it's your procedures, it's how you conduct business as a company. Yes, there are security controls, yes, there are a bunch of check boxes for that type of stuff, but it's really more about documentation, something that a lot of small businesses struggle with to begin with, because they're busy doing what it is that they're good at, especially if they're on the smaller side. If you're less than 100 employees, chances are your focus is on growing that business and delivering the product or service that you create and keeping it viable. It's not focused on all of the documentation and everything that comes along with, once again, enterprise, right? Enterprise is pushed down into a small business because we're part of that technology infrastructure that enterprises kind of put out there, and we adopted it just because we need to be competitive, and we've used it, and now it's intrinsic with our companies. And so is the risk that comes along with using this technology. It's intrinsic with the technologies that we're using. Therefore, unfortunately, we have to do all the same types of things that enterprises have to do, including this CMMC type stuff that involves documentation, that involves planning. And these aren't books that go on the shelf, folks. These are things that have to be actively enforced. They have to be reviewed. You have to show that these are living, breathing policies within the company. And that's what compliance is pushing. Cybersecurity is the nuts and bolts. Compliance is the one that's making sure that you're checking the boxes, that you're meeting all of the compliance pieces. And not only, again, I want to be very clear, it's not only about the checking the box part. I don't want to make you think that it's just paperwork. It's really about the spirit of it. And that's where it comes into the policy and the culture of a company, because it's really dictating what type of security first mindset your company has, how you're dealing with things. That the documentation part is a huge part of it. CMMC, the M and M stand for maturity model. Maturity being the key word here. It's showing that you have maturity, that you are documenting the processes, that you have processes in place for all of these things. So hope I'm not beating a dead horse here, and I hope you are gaining something from this conversation. So how does this really impact, the smaller businesses, the ones that don't have to really comply with CMMC and that level of thing? Well, we can see clearly because of some new things that have come down the pipe in the PCI, which is your credit cards. That is, if you take credit cards, you have to be compliant, and that's the PCI part. And they're already kind of moving. It used to be we just had to secure where the credit card information was. Well, they are departing from that a little bit, and they're requiring that you have some baseline cybersecurity practices in your business. This is not a bad thing. This is a good thing, but it may impact you. It may impact you in ways that you don't know, because one of the things that aren't great about this is the communication. No one's going out and telling you, just like everything else. I'm sure if you're in the state of Connecticut, things are put in, and sometimes you're the last to know. Did you get your BOI stuff done already? Perfect example of something that was implemented. The fines are huge if you don't do it, but yet you really didn't get a memo on it, especially if you were busy, if you were having some type of business challenge or anything like that. You may be focused on that. And unless you have third party outside telling you, or you just happen to see something about it and take it seriously, you would know that that is something that you need to comply with. You don't want to find out after the fact. Same thing with the compliance part. Especially, a lot of people get T-boned by FTC safeguards. Now, we haven't seen, I'm going to be honest here, we haven't seen a lot of uh, push on the FTC safeguards part, meaning that uh, we were expecting that this would have more teeth. And this has been the problem historically with HIPAA. If you're a doctor, you understand doctors typically scoff at HIPAA, not because that, they don't take client data seriously. It's not. But the costs involved, especially for small practices to get their practice to that next level, are sometimes exorbitant. Insurance companies have already brought many doctors' bottom line to a thin piece of meat. So, the thought of going negative to invest inside of systems to do this, when it's not being enforced, I get it. I understand, but it's a business decision. It's their decision to take on that risk. Um, well, FTC's kind of gone by the same way, where we've not seen a lot of enforcement outside of after something happens. Same thing with HIPAA. Uh, you see a lot of activity if something happens. If you have a disgruntled employee, uh, FTC safeguards, the employees, most of them don't even realize that FTC safeguards are a compliance level that most companies need to meet. So we haven't seen that yet. We haven't seen that happen. But it's also something you don't want to get T-boned by. So you really need to understand as a small business what level of compliance that you need to be. And again, if you take credit cards, you have at least one. Now, we don't consider that a major compliance like FTC or SEC or HIPAA. But if they continue to expand and change, because this is what we're seeing all the time, they continue to change the realities of that rule. We are all going to get impacted by this, because you're going to be mandated in order to transact with credit cards. You're going to be mandated that you follow some cybersecurity best practices. And that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's fine by me. And I'm not saying that from a, personal business standpoint. I am saying that from everyone needs to be at this point having some sort of plan for cyber security, because, as far as it goes right now, failure to plan is a plan to fail. You are going to get hit, popped, and affected by this in ways that you are not going to be able to push underneath the carpet, unfortunately. It's just, that's where we are right now. So you need to have the basic fundamentals in place. And that's really what, like, the PCI stuff is trying to push. So for many companies, this isn't going to be a big push, but it's something that needs to be done nonetheless. So I hope I made the difference between compliance and cybersecurity a little bit more clear. I hope you're still with me and I didn't bore you to tears, but I thought it's something that really needed to be addressed. We've used these terms interchangeably for years and years, and it was just not right of us to do so, because now we have to kind of rip those into separate things to understand. And it goes hand in hand with last week's conversation. Your IT guy is typically not the compliance guy, right? Unless they're asking you the questions we went over last week and stuff like that. They probably aren't doing that part. And it's really not their job, unless they've stated to you otherwise that they're going to take on that responsibility, unless you're paying them to deliver these additional services. It's really not their job. So if you have concerns, just reach out to us. My link's always in the bottom of these, in the comments on these. And we are going to repost our lives as Facebook Reels and YouTube. We're going to be posting them across the board. And we're going to take away that 5-minute pre-show. Thanks to, I don't remember who made that comment last week, but thank you for that. We will make sure that that's done. So you get nothing but content. You don't have to fast forward. I'm not seeing any Q&A items this week, so that is great. I hope I just didn't put everyone to sleep. Well, with that, I think we're going to conclude and have a wonderful week. We'll see you next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. Have a great day.